The private study was silent except for the sound of his breathing. He sat in the leather chair, shirt unbuttoned, blood staining the expensive fabric from a wound on his shoulder that needed attention but hadn't received it. Everyone who worked for him knew the rule: you don't touch the boss. Ever. For any reason. Not to help, not to comfort, not even to save his life. Distance was protocol. Distance was survival. But she didn't know the rule. So when she walked into that room and saw him bleeding, saw the pain he was trying to hide, she did the unthinkable. She stepped closer. "Let me do it," she whispered, her hands already reaching for the first aid kit on his desk. "I'll be fast." He should have stopped her, should have ordered her out, should have reminded her that proximity to him was the most dangerous place anyone could be. Instead, he did nothing. Just watched her hands move toward him with a kind of inevitability that felt like fate. And in that moment, she crossed a line that would change everything, because no one was ever allowed this close to the Korean Mafia boss, and the reason why would destroy her. If you're still watching right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe to our channel for stories that can make you smile and can also make you cry for absolute strangers. Now, let's get into the story. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chen, and she'd been hired 3 weeks ago as the private physician for the Kang family estate in Seoul. The job description had been simple: on-call medical care for the household staff and occasional family members, generous salary, private quarters, minimal questions asked. What they hadn't mentioned was that the household belonged to one of Seoul's most powerful organized crime families, or that her primary patient would be a man everyone called Sajangnim, the boss, and spoke about in whispers. She'd seen him exactly twice before tonight, once from a distance, walking through the garden with men in suits flanking him like shadows. Once in passing, when he'd walked past the medical wing and their eyes had met for exactly 2 seconds before he looked away. Both times, she'd felt the same thing: a cold assessment, like he was calculating her value and threat level in a single glance. Tonight was different. Tonight, his head of security, a man named Choi who spoke English with a thick accent, had knocked on her door at midnight. "Sajangnim needs medical attention. Quietly. You come now." No explanation. No context. Just an order. Sarah had grabbed her medical bag and followed him through hallways she'd never seen before, deeper into the private wing of the estate, to a study with mahogany walls and the smell of expensive whiskey, where Kang Ji-hoon sat in a leather chair, jacket discarded, white shirt soaked with blood on the left shoulder. He looked up when she entered. His expression was completely neutral. "Gunshot wound," he said in perfect English. "Through and through. Needs cleaning and stitches." Sarah's medical training kicked in immediately. "You need a hospital. This could have hit an artery." "No hospitals." His voice was flat, final. "You fix it here or you leave." She set down her bag. "I'll need to examine it first." She started to move closer. That's when Choi grabbed her arm, hard. "You don't touch Sajangnim," he said. "You give instructions. He does it himself, or I do it. Not you." Sarah looked at Choi, then at Ji-hoon, who was watching this exchange with that same neutral expression. "That's insane," Sarah said. "He can't reach his own shoulder properly. And no offense, but are you trained in wound care?" "Doesn't matter," Choi said. "The rule is the rule." "What rule?" Sarah demanded. Choi looked at Ji-hoon as if asking permission to explain. Ji-hoon shook his head once, very slight, but definitive. "Just the rule," Choi said. "No one touches Sajangnim, ever." Sarah looked at the blood soaking through Ji-hoon's shirt, at the pallor of his skin, at the careful way he was breathing to hide pain. "He's going to pass out from blood loss if we don't stop the bleeding soon," she said. "Then work fast," Ji-hoon said. "But you don't touch me. Tell Choi what to do." Sarah had worked emergency rooms, had seen gunshot wounds before, had treated injuries that should have killed people, but she'd never been told she couldn't touch her patient. She opened her bag, started laying out supplies. I need to assess the wound first. That means I need to see it clearly. Can you remove your shirt? Ji-hoon unbuttoned it slowly, wincing with each movement, pulled it off one arm. The wounded shoulder made that impossible on the other side. The shirt hung off him, revealing a torso covered in scars. Old ones, new ones, a road map of violence, and a bullet wound that was still bleeding, though slower now. Sarah moved on instinct, stepped closer, reached out. Choi grabbed her wrist before she made contact. I warned you. He's bleeding, Sarah said. I need to apply pressure. I'll do it, Choi interrupted. You're not trained? I said I'll do it. They stood there, locked in a battle of wills, while Ji-hoon watched with an expression Sarah couldn't read. Then he spoke. Let her assess, from distance. Then Choi does the work. It was the most inefficient medical care Sarah had ever provided. She stood 3 feet away, giving instructions to Choi, who followed them clumsily. Press harder. No, not there. 2 inches higher. You need to irrigate the wound before you can close it. No saline, not water. Sterile technique means you can't touch anything else once you've touched the wound. Start over. 15 minutes in, Choi was sweating and Ji-hoon's face had gone gray. This isn't working, Sarah said. He needs proper care. Then explain better, Choi snapped. I can't explain my hands, Sarah shot back. Medical care requires touch, precision. This is medieval. This is the rule, Choi repeated. Sarah looked at Ji-hoon, really looked at him, past the cold exterior, past the power, past the fear he inspired, and saw a man in pain who was too proud to admit it. Why? She asked him directly. Why can't anyone touch you? His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something flicker there, something almost human. Because proximity equals vulnerability, he said quietly, and vulnerability gets people killed. I'm a doctor, Sarah said, not an assassin. Everyone is someone's weapon, Ji-hoon replied. Even you. The words hung in the air. Then Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She pulled her wrist from Choi's grip, stepped forward, picked up the gauze and antiseptic. Let me do it, she whispered. I'll be fast. Choi moved to stop her. Ji-hoon held up his hand. Wait. Everyone froze. Sarah stood there, hands hovering inches from his wounded shoulder, waiting for permission she wasn't sure would come. Ji-hoon looked at her, at the determination in her face, at the medical bag, at the supplies she held. Then, inexplicably, he nodded. Once. Fast, he said. Sarah didn't waste time questioning it. She worked quickly, efficiently, cleaning the wound, checking for fragments, irrigating, stitching. Her hands were steady even though her heart was racing, because she could feel Choi's eyes on her, could feel the weight of the rule she was breaking, could feel Ji-hoon's gaze watching her every move. But she was also a doctor, and her patient needed care. 10 minutes. That's all it took. When she stepped back, the wound was closed, bandaged, proper medical care finally administered. Ji-hoon looked at his shoulder, then at her. Thank you, he said. 2 words, simple, but they felt weighted with something Sarah didn't understand. Choi was staring at Ji-hoon like he'd grown a second head. Sajangnim, the rule. I'm aware of the rule, Ji-hoon cut him off. Leave us. But, I said leave. Choi hesitated, then bowed and left the room. The door closed with a soft click. And Sarah was alone with the Mafia boss she'd just touched. The man no one was ever allowed this close to. He stood up slowly, testing the range of motion in his shoulder. You're good at this, he observed. It's my job, Sarah replied. Your job was to follow instructions. You broke the rule. The rule was going to get you killed. Maybe that was preferable. Sarah stared at him. To proper medical care? To what happens now? The words sent ice down her spine. What happens now? Ji-hoon pulled on a clean shirt someone had left on his desk, buttoned it slowly. Now you're close, he said, and close is dangerous in my world. I'm your doctor, that's all. That's what you think, Ji-hoon said, but my enemies won't see it that way. They'll see proximity, access, leverage. I don't understand. You will, Ji-hoon said. He walked to the door, opened it. Choi will escort you back to your quarters. Don't leave them unless I send for you. Am I in danger? Ji-hoon paused in the doorway, looked back at her. Yes, he said simply. We both are now. Then he left, and Sarah stood in that study, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and blood and expensive whiskey, understanding that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross, because no one was ever allowed this close to the Korean Mafia boss, and she'd just discovered the rule existed for a reason. She just didn't know what that reason was yet. What Sarah didn't know yet, what she wouldn't understand until it was too late, was that the no-touching rule wasn't about control. It wasn't about power or dominance or maintaining distance for its own sake. It was about survival. Because in Kang Ji-hoon's world, everyone he allowed close became a target. His childhood friend who'd been his closest confidant, dead in a car accident that wasn't an accident. His first love, before he inherited the empire, disappeared. They'd sent him pieces to prove she was gone. His former bodyguard who'd saved his life 3 times, killed by his own brother who'd been turned by rival families. Every person who'd gotten close had been used against him, either killed to hurt him or turned into weapons to destroy him. So he'd made the rule. No one gets close. Ever. Physical distance created emotional distance. Emotional distance meant no leverage. No leverage meant no one could use the people around him to make him weak. For 8 years, the rule had held. For 8 years, no one had been allowed within arm's reach unless absolutely necessary, and even then, only people he'd known for decades. Until tonight. Until Dr. Sarah Chen had touched him without hesitation, without fear, without understanding what that touch meant, and now she was marked, not by him, by everyone watching him for weakness. By every enemy calculating how to exploit proximity. By every person in his organization who now saw her as the first crack in the armor their boss had worn for nearly a decade. What happened in that study wasn't intimacy. It was a declaration. And in Ji-hoon's world, declarations meant war. The only question was whether Sarah would survive to understand why. The next morning, Sarah woke to find breakfast waiting outside her door. Not unusual. Meals were always delivered. But this time there was a note. Handwritten. In Korean. She used her phone to translate it. Remain in quarters today. Doctor's orders. She didn't know whether to laugh or be concerned. By noon, she was climbing the walls. She tried to leave her room, found 2 guards stationed outside her door. I need to check on my patient, she said in English. They stared at her blankly. She tried again in broken Korean using her phone app to help. One guard made a phone call, spoke rapidly, hung up. Sajangnim says you rest today. He's fine. I need to verify that myself. Gunshot wounds can get infected. He's fine. The guard repeated, more firmly. Sarah went back inside. Something was wrong. She'd been hired to provide medical care. She was being paid extremely well to be available. Now she was being confined to her quarters. She tried calling the house manager who'd hired her. No answer. Tried the head of household staff. Voicemail. Tried Choi, the security head. His number went straight to a message in Korean she couldn't understand. By evening, Sarah was genuinely worried, not about Ji-hoon, about herself. She'd heard stories about people who worked for powerful families and disappeared. Was that what was happening? The knock on her door at 8 p.m. made her jump. She opened it to find Choi standing there. "Sajangnim wants to see you." "Finally," Sarah said. "I need to check his wound. It's been over 12 hours. "Not for medical," Choi interrupted. "For talking." That was worse somehow. Sarah followed him through the estate again. This time they didn't go to the study. They went to a private dining room she'd never seen before. Ji-hoon sat at a table set for two, his shoulder bandaged but moving normally. He'd clearly had someone else redress the wound. "Sit," he said. Sarah sat, wary. "You're probably wondering why you were confined today," Ji-hoon said. "The thought crossed my mind. It was for your protection." "From what?" "From being seen," Ji-hoon replied. "Last night, 17 people knew you touched me. 17 people who now have information that makes you valuable. I'm a doctor. I provided medical care. That's not valuable information. It is when I've spent 8 years ensuring no one gets that close," Ji-hoon said. "Now every person in my organization is recalculating their understanding of my vulnerabilities. And every enemy we have is asking the same question. Who is she?" Sarah felt her mouth go dry. "I'm nobody." "That's what I told them," Ji-hoon said. "But they won't believe it, because I don't break rules, ever. So the fact that I broke this one means you matter, which makes you a target." "I don't want to matter," Sarah said quickly. "I want to do my job and go home when my contract ends." "That's not possible anymore." "Why not?" "Because proximity marks people in my world," Ji-hoon said. "Once you're close, you're never neutral again. You're either an asset or a liability. And my enemies will spend resources figuring out which one." Sarah stood up. "Then I quit. Effective immediately. I'll pack my things and leave tonight." "Sit down, Dr. Chen." Something in his voice made her sit. Ji-hoon leaned forward. "If you leave now, you become a loose end. Someone who knows where I live, who's seen my security, who has access to my medical information. Do you understand what happens to loose ends in my world?" Sarah did. She'd heard enough stories. "So I'm trapped," she said. "You're protected," Ji-hoon corrected. "As long as you're here under my roof, you're untouchable. My security protects you, my reputation protects you. The moment you leave, you're on your own. That's not protection, that's imprisonment." "Call it what you want," Ji-hoon said. "But it's reality. You crossed a line last night. There's no uncrossing it." "Because I saved your life?" Sarah's voice rose. "Because I did my job as a doctor?" "Because you touched me," Ji-hoon said flatly. "That's the crime, not the medical care, the contact, and now everyone knows it happened." "This is insane." "This is survival," Ji-hoon countered. "Welcome to my world." They sat in silence. Finally, Sarah spoke. "What happens now?" "Now you stay close," Ji-hoon said. "Where I can see you, where my security can protect you, where my enemies can see that you're under my direct protection." "For how long?" "Until the situation stabilizes. Until people stop being interested in who you are. Until the novelty wears off and you become part of the background again." "How long does that take?" Ji-hoon was quiet. Then, "I don't know. It's never happened before." Sarah felt her world tilt. "What?" "You're the first person I've allowed this close in 8 years," Ji-hoon admitted. "I don't know what happens next. I'm making this up as I go." "That's not reassuring." "It wasn't meant to be," Ji-hoon said. "It was meant to be honest." He stood up. "Dinner will be served shortly. I suggest you eat. Tomorrow your real training begins." "Training for what?" "For surviving proximity to me," Ji-hoon said, and left. Sarah sat alone in that dining room, a meal she couldn't eat in front of her, and understood with creeping horror that she'd walked into a cage she couldn't see. And the man who'd built it was the same man she'd tried to save. The training Ji-hoon mentioned turned out to be lessons in paranoia. Over the next week, Sarah learned how to check for surveillance devices in her room. Found 3, all placed by Ji-hoon's own security for her protection. How to vary her routine so no one could predict her movements, even though she was confined to the estate. How to identify if she was being followed. By whom, she never left the grounds. How to communicate without being overheard. Why did she need this skill? The instructor was Choi, who approached the lessons with grim efficiency. "You think this is excessive," he said one afternoon as he taught her how to detect poison in food. "It's not. This is baseline survival for anyone close to Sajangnim." "I'm not close to him," Sarah protested. "I touched him once. Medically." "You broke the rule," Choi said. "Close is relative now." But the training revealed a contradiction Sarah couldn't explain. If Ji-hoon wanted distance, why was he requiring her to have dinner with him every night? If proximity was dangerous, why was he insisting she accompany him on his morning walks through the garden? If contact was forbidden, why had he started asking her questions? Personal questions. About her childhood in California, her medical training, why she'd come to Korea. It didn't make sense. Sarah tried asking Choi about it. "Why does he want me around if being close is so dangerous?" Choi looked uncomfortable. "Not my place to explain Sajang-nim's decisions. But you've worked for him for 10 years. You must have some insight." Choi was quiet for a long moment. Then, "He's testing something." "Testing what?" "Whether the rule was protecting him or imprisoning him." That night, during their scheduled dinner, Sarah brought it up directly. "Why am I really here?" she asked. Ji-hoon looked up from his meal. "You're my physician." "No, I'm not. I haven't treated a patient in a week. I'm being trained like I'm entering a war zone and eating dinner with you every night like we're—" She trailed off. "Like we're what?" Ji-hoon asked. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "That's the problem. I don't understand what this is." Ji-hoon set down his chopsticks. "You want honesty?" "Please." "I don't know either," he said. "For 8 years I've lived by a simple rule. No one gets close. It kept me alive, kept the people around me alive, worked perfectly. Then you walked into my study and touched me like it was nothing, like the rule didn't exist, like proximity wasn't dangerous. It was medical care. It was the first time in 8 years someone touched me without fear." Ji-hoon interrupted. "And I didn't hate it. That's the problem." Sarah's breath caught. "So yes," Ji-hoon continued, "I'm testing something. Testing whether I can have someone close without it destroying them. Testing whether the rule was necessary or if I've been living in a prison of my own making. Testing whether proximity can be something other than a death sentence." "And if the test fails?" Sarah asked quietly. "Then you were right to break the rule," Ji-hoon said. "And I was wrong to enforce it. Either way, we'll know." "That's not scientific," Sarah said. "You can't test survival with someone's life." "I test survival with lives every day," Ji-hoon said. "That's what leadership in my world means. The difference is this time I'm betting on hope instead of fear." "What if hope gets me killed?" "Then I'll have my answer," Ji-hoon said. "And I'll go back to the rule. Forever." It should have been terrifying. It was. But it was also something else Sarah didn't want to acknowledge. It was the first time anyone had ever looked at her and seen possibility instead of utility, even if that possibility might destroy her. 2 weeks into her confinement, Sarah noticed something strange. When Ji-hoon was around, security was tight but invisible. When he left the estate for business, security around her became oppressive. 6 guards outside her room instead of 2. Restrictions on which parts of the estate she could access. Mandatory check-ins every 2 hours. "Why the difference?" she asked Choi. When Sajangnim is here, he's your security, Choi explained. When he's gone, we have to compensate. I don't need 6 guards to watch me sleep. It's not to watch you, Choi said. It's to watch everyone else. Make sure no one gets ideas. Ideas about what? Choi gave her a look that said she was being deliberately dense. You're valuable now. People notice valuable things. Sarah was about to argue when her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, in English. Dr. Chen, we should talk. You're in danger you don't understand. She showed it to Choi immediately. His face went dark. Sajangnim needs to see this. Now. Within 10 minutes, she was in Ji-hoon's office, watching him read the message with an expression she couldn't decipher. Interesting, he said. Interesting? Sarah repeated. Someone just threatened me. No one threatened you, Ji-hoon corrected. Someone offered to enlighten you. Very different. How is that better? Ji-hoon forwarded the number to Choi. Trace it. I want to know who's reaching out and why. Then he looked at Sarah. This was inevitable. My enemies would try to turn you. The question is whether they're doing it to extract information or to plant misinformation. I don't have information to extract, Sarah said. You have proximity, Ji-hoon replied. That's information in itself. Where I eat, where I sleep, how I move through the house, my routines, my vulnerabilities, all accessible to you now. Sarah felt sick. I would never... I know, Ji-hoon interrupted. But they don't, so they'll test you. See if you can be bought, threatened, manipulated. What should I do? Nothing, Ji-hoon said. Don't respond, don't engage, let them wonder. Over the next 3 days, 7 more messages came, each one more specific than the last. Do you know why the rule exists? Ask him about Min Seo. He's using you as bait. You realize that, right? The last person who got this close ended up in pieces. Literally. You're not special. Your strategy. Wake up. Sarah stopped showing them to Ji-hoon after the 3rd one. Not because she believed them, but because each message made him darker, colder, more withdrawn, like he was preparing for something Sarah couldn't see. Then came the incident that changed everything. Sarah was in the medical wing restocking supplies when she heard shouting, Korean, angry. Getting closer. Choi burst through the door. Stay here, don't come out. What's happening? Intruder. On the grounds. Stay put. He left. Locked the door from the outside. Sarah heard gunshots, distant but clear. Then silence. 10 minutes that felt like hours. Finally, the door unlocked. Ji-hoon stood there, uninjured, but his expression was volcanic. We're moving you, he said. Tonight. Moving me where? My private wing. Direct security. No access points except through me. Ji-hoon, what happened? Someone got within 50 meters of you, he said. That's 49 meters too close. Did you catch them? Yes. And? They're being questioned. The way he said it made Sarah's blood run cold. Why were they trying to get to me? She asked. Ji-hoon met her eyes. To prove they could. To show me that the rule exists for a reason. That proximity creates vulnerability. That I was right to enforce it for 8 years and wrong to break it for you. Maybe they're right, Sarah said quietly. Maybe, Ji-hoon agreed. But I'm not ending the test. I'm escalating it. What does that mean? It means you move into my private wing tonight, Ji-hoon said. It means you stay within my sight at all times. It means everyone in my organization and outside it knows definitively that you're under my direct protection. That makes me more of a target, not less. Yes, Ji-hoon said. But it also makes attacking you an attack on me. And no one survived that in 8 years. He turned to leave. Ji-hoon, Sarah called. He stopped. Who's Min Seo? She asked. His entire body went rigid. Where did you hear that name? The messages. They keep mentioning her. Who was she? Ji-hoon was silent for so long, Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. Then, she's the reason the rule exists, and if you're smart, you won't ask about her again. He left, and Sarah was escorted to the private wing, into rooms that smelled like Ji-hoon's cologne and felt like crossing a threshold she couldn't uncross, because she was closer now. So much closer. And everyone was watching to see if it would kill her. If you're still watching, drop a "still watching" in the comments, because this next part changes everything. The private wing was beautiful and terrifying. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden, modern furniture, art that probably cost more than Sarah's medical school tuition, and Ji-hoon's presence everywhere. His office was 20 feet from her new bedroom. His bedroom was across the hall. The dining area they now shared was intimate. Table for two, no staff allowed during meals. "This is too much," Sarah said the first night. "This is necessary," Ji-hoon corrected. "The intruder proved that distributed security has vulnerabilities. Consolidated security doesn't." "You mean you have control here?" "Yes," Ji-hoon said simply. "I do, and that keeps you alive. Or it makes me more dependent on you." Also true. His honesty was disarming. They fell into a routine that felt surreal. Morning coffee together, Ji-hoon reading reports while Sarah reviewed medical journals. Afternoon walks in the private garden attached to his wing, heavily secured, no one else allowed. Evening meals where they talked about everything except the obvious. That proximity was creating something neither of them had intended. Sarah caught herself watching him. The way he moved, the way he thought through problems, the rare moments when his guard dropped and she saw the person underneath the Mafia boss. She also caught him watching her, when he thought she wasn't looking, with an expression that made her heart race and her survival instincts scream warnings. Then came the night everything shifted. Sarah woke to the sound of Ji-hoon shouting, in Korean, anguished. The kind of sound someone makes in nightmares they can't escape. She should have stayed in her room, should have let him handle it. Instead, she crossed the hall, knocked softly. "Ji-hoon?" The shouting stopped. Silence. Then, "Come in." She opened the door. Ji-hoon sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands, breathing like he'd run a marathon. "Nightmare?" Sarah asked softly. "Memory," he corrected. She should have left, should have respected boundaries. Instead, she sat beside him, not touching, but close. "Want to talk about it?" "No." "Want me to leave?" "No." They sat in silence. Finally, Ji-hoon spoke. "Minseo was my younger sister, half-sister technically, different mothers. She wasn't part of the organization. Lived a normal life. College student, wanted to be a teacher." Sarah's breath caught, past tense. "Was. I loved her," Ji-hoon continued. "She was the only person in my life who saw me as human instead of useful, who talked to me like a brother instead of a boss." "What happened?" "I let her get close," Ji-hoon said, literally and figuratively. "She'd come to the estate for dinners. We'd talk for hours. I thought I was protecting her by keeping her separate from the business. I was wrong." Sarah waited. "My enemies found her," Ji-hoon said, his voice hollow. "Took her. Sent me proof they had her. Gave me impossible demands. Kill myself or watch her die. I was trying to negotiate, trying to find her, trying to save her without destroying everything." "Ji-hoon!" "They killed her anyway," he said. "Not because I failed to meet their demands, because proximity to me made her valuable as a message. They wanted to prove I couldn't protect anyone, that caring about someone made me weak." Tears were streaming down his face now. "They were right," he whispered. "She died because I loved her, because I let her close. Because I thought I could have a relationship without it becoming a weapon." "That's not your fault," Sarah said. "It's completely my fault," Ji-hoon countered. I knew the risks. I knew what my world does to people I care about. But I wanted to believe I could be both, the boss and the brother. I was wrong, and she paid for my delusion. Sarah reached out, took his hand. He didn't pull away. After Min Seo died, Ji-hoon said, I made the rule, no one gets close, ever. Physical distance creates emotional distance. Emotional distance means no one else dies because they mattered to me. And it's worked, Sarah said. For 8 years. Yes, Ji-hoon agreed, which is why breaking it for you terrifies me. He turned to look at her, really look at her. I don't know why I let you touch me that night, he admitted. I don't know why I didn't enforce the rule. I don't know why I'm testing it now. But Sarah, if this ends the way it ended with Min Seo, if my enemies figure out that you matter and use that against me, then we deal with it, Sarah interrupted. Together. You don't understand what you're saying. I understand perfectly, Sarah said. You're terrified that caring about someone will destroy them. I'm terrified that I'm starting to care about someone whose world eats people alive. We're both scared. But fear isn't a good enough reason to live in isolation forever. It kept me alive for 8 years. Did it? Sarah asked. Or did it just keep you breathing while you slowly died inside? Ji-hoon stared at her. Then very slowly, very deliberately, he brought their joined hands up and pressed them against his chest. You feel that? He asked. Sarah felt his heartbeat, racing. That's fear, Ji-hoon said, of what happens if I let myself care, of what happens if I don't, of choosing wrong and having to live with consequences measured in bodies. I'm not Min Seo, Sarah said. I know the risks. I chose to stay. You chose before you understood. Then let me choose again, Sarah said. Right now. With full information. I choose to stay. I choose proximity. I choose whatever this is, even knowing it might destroy me. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. You're the bravest or stupidest person I've ever met. Probably both, Sarah agreed. He laughed. Actually laughed. A sound Sarah had never heard before, and in that moment something shifted. The distance he'd maintained for 8 years finally collapsed. Ji-hoon pulled her closer, not sexually. Just desperately, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Sarah wrapped her arms around him and felt him shake. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. I don't know how to care without destroying. Then we figure it out together, Sarah said. No rules, no distance, just us, navigating as we go. They stayed like that until sunrise, and when they finally pulled apart, something fundamental had changed. The rule was broken, completely, irrevocably, and now they'd both find out if proximity meant death or if it meant something else entirely. The next morning, Ji-hoon was gone when Sarah woke, a note on her bedside table, in English this time. Emergency meeting, back by noon, stay in the wing. J.H. Sarah tried not to read into the fact that he'd signed it with initials instead of his title. By 1 p.m., he hadn't returned. By 3 p.m., Sarah was pacing. By 5 p.m., Choi appeared at the wing entrance. Sajangnim wants you in his office now. Sarah followed him to Ji-hoon's main office. Not the one in the private wing, the formal one where he conducted business. Ji-hoon sat behind his desk, expression unreadable. 3 other men were in the room. Older, authority radiating from them. Dr. Chen, Ji-hoon said formally, these are the heads of my organization. They have concerns. One of the older men spoke in Korean, harsh, angry. Ji-hoon responded, also in Korean, his tone firm but controlled. The argument escalated. Sarah understood none of it but heard her name mentioned repeatedly. Finally, Ji-hoon held up a hand. Silence fell. He switched to English. They believe you're a vulnerability, that my protection of you makes me weak, that breaking the 8-year rule has made others question my judgment. Sarah felt her world tilt. "What are you saying?" "They're giving me a choice," Ji-hoon said. "Reinstate the rule, send you away, publicly demonstrate that proximity means nothing, or face a leadership challenge." "A challenge to your authority?" "A challenge to my life," Ji-hoon corrected. "In my world, leadership disputes end in blood." The older men watched this exchange with cold calculation. Sarah understood immediately. This was a test, not of her, of Ji-hoon. Would he choose power or proximity? "What do you want me to do?" Sarah asked. "I want you to leave," Ji-hoon said. His voice was completely flat. "Tonight, Choi will escort you to the airport. You'll receive 6 months' salary as severance. Your contract is terminated effective immediately." Each word felt like a bullet. "I see," Sarah said quietly. One of the older men spoke. Ji-hoon translated. "He says this proves I can still make rational decisions, that the rule will be reinstated, that you are an aberration, nothing more." Sarah looked at Ji-hoon, really looked at him, and saw absolutely nothing in his expression. The man who'd held her last night while confronting 8 years of trauma was gone. In his place was the Mafia boss who survived by being ruthless. "Understood," Sarah said. She turned to Choi. "I'll need 2 hours to pack." "1 hour," Choi said. Sarah left the office, walked back to the private wing with her head high and her heart shattering. She'd known this was a possibility, had known Ji-hoon's world didn't allow for weakness. But she'd started to believe the test might succeed. She'd been wrong. In her room, she packed mechanically. Clothes, medical supplies, the few personal items she'd brought to Korea. 45 minutes. That's all it took to erase 3 weeks of proximity. Choi knocked. "Car is ready." Sarah took one last look at the wing that had become home. At the garden where they'd walked every afternoon. At the dining table where they'd shared meals and conversations. At Ji-hoon's closed office door, where he was presumably celebrating his recommitment to isolation. She followed Choi to the car, got in. The gates of the estate opened, and as they pulled away, Sarah saw Ji-hoon standing at a window, watching her leave. His expression was still unreadable, but she could have sworn his hand was pressed against the glass, like he was trying to hold on to something slipping away. The car drove through Seoul traffic toward the airport. Sarah stared out the window and told herself this was better, safer, that she'd gotten out before proximity killed her like it had killed Minseo, that Ji-hoon had done the right thing, that the rule existed for a reason. She almost believed it. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Ji-hoon's number. Just 4 words in English. "Forgive me. Trust me." Sarah's heart stopped. She looked at Choi. He was focused on the road, expression neutral. She typed back, "What?" The response came immediately. "The office was monitored. Had to make it look real. They needed to see me choose power." Sarah's hands were shaking. "And did you?" "I chose you," came the reply. "Now I'm choosing survival. For both of us." "I don't understand." "You will. Go to the airport. Board the plane. Trust that this isn't ending. It's just changing." The messages stopped. Sarah sat in that car, mind racing, trying to understand what was happening. Was this real? Or was Ji-hoon giving her false hope to make the separation easier? The airport came into view. Choi pulled up to departures. "Your ticket is at the counter," he said in his heavily accented English. "First class, Los Angeles." "Choi," Sarah said. "What's really happening?" Choi met her eyes. "Sajangnim is very smart man. You trust him. He has plan." "What plan?" "Not my place to say." But Choi's expression suggested he knew and approved. Sarah got out of the car, watched it drive away, stood in front of Incheon International Airport with her suitcase and her shattered certainty and no idea what came next. She could board the plane. go back to Los Angeles, resume her old life. Or she could trust 4 words from a man who'd just publicly sent her away. Forgive me. Trust me. Sarah closed her eyes, made a choice, and walked into the airport, not knowing if she was walking toward freedom or the most dangerous gamble of her life. Sarah boarded the plane, found her first-class seat, sat down, waited. The flight attendant brought champagne. Sarah waved it away. Passengers filed past. The cabin filled. Doors closed. The plane pushed back from the gate. Sarah's phone buzzed. One last message before they required airplane mode. Check your bag. Inside pocket. Sarah opened her carry-on. The inside pocket she never used. Inside was an envelope, thick, official-looking. She opened it. Documents, in English and Korean. A contract, employment contract, for a private medical consulting firm based in Seoul. Salary, 3 times what she'd been making at the estate. Client, confidential, duration, 1 year renewable. Start date, immediate upon return to Seoul. There was also a key card, hotel room, Grand Hyatt Seoul, and a note, handwritten, Ji-hoon's handwriting. The rule still exists. For them, not for you. Come back when you're ready. I'll be waiting. J.H. Sarah read it 3 times, trying to understand. The plane was taxiing now, headed for the runway. She had maybe 2 minutes to decide. Stay on this flight, go back to safety, leave Ji-hoon and his impossible world behind, or trust that he had a plan. That sending her away publicly was strategy, not surrender. The flight attendant's voice came over the intercom. Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff. Sarah grabbed her bag, stood up. Excuse me, she said to the attendant. I need to get off this plane. The attendant looked confused. Ma'am, we're about to... I need to get off, Sarah repeated. Right now, it's an emergency. 10 minutes of chaos later, Sarah was back in the airport. Her luggage had been offloaded. She'd been escorted off the plane with suspicious efficiency that suggested this had been anticipated. Choi was waiting at the gate. Took you long enough, he said, with what might have been a smile. What the hell is happening? Sarah demanded. Sajangnim will explain. Come. Choi led her to a car. Different car than before, more discreet. They drove not back to the estate, but to the Grand Hyatt. To a penthouse suite, Sarah was pretty sure cost more per night than most people's monthly rent. Ji-hoon was standing at the windows overlooking the city. He turned when she entered. You came back, he said. You knew I would. I hoped, didn't know. Sarah dropped her bag. Explain. Now, what just happened? Ji-hoon gestured to the seating area. Sit. This is complicated. Sarah sat. Ji-hoon sat across from her. The men in my office today, he began, were testing me. They'd heard rumors I'd broken the rule. Needed to see if it made me weak, if I'd choose a woman over my authority. So you sent me away to prove you wouldn't, Sarah said. I got that part. I sent you away to prove I could, Ji-hoon corrected. Different thing. They needed to see I still had control. That proximity hadn't made me irrational. But Sarah, I never intended for you to actually leave Korea. The plane ticket was necessary theater, Ji-hoon interrupted. Everyone needed to see you board, needed to believe you were gone, that the rule was reinstated. But you're not bound to the estate anymore, Ji-hoon said. You're not my employee. You're an independent contractor hired by a consulting firm I own under 3 shell companies. You work for yourself. You choose your clients. You happen to live in Seoul. Sarah began to understand. And if you happen to be one of those clients, then that's a professional relationship, Ji-hoon said. Documented, legal, completely separate from the estate and my organization. So publicly I'm gone. The rule is reinstated. You've proven you'll choose power over proximity. Exactly. But privately. Ji-hoon leaned forward. Privately, you're free. Free to see me. Free to walk away. free to choose proximity without it being framed as weakness on my part or vulnerability on yours. That's surprisingly clever, Sarah admitted. I've had 8 years to think about how to circumvent a rule I created, Ji-hoon said. The question was whether I'd ever be brave enough to try. And what changed? You did, Ji-hoon said simply. You showed me that the rule was protecting me from grief, but also from living. That isolation is safe but empty. That maybe, just maybe, proximity doesn't have to be a death sentence if we're smart about it. Sarah processed this. So what now? Now you decide, Ji-hoon said. This hotel suite is yours for as long as you want it. The consulting contract is real. You can build a practice here, see other clients, live your life. And if you want to see me, we do it away from the estate, away from the organization, in a space that's ours, not theirs. You're asking me to have a secret relationship with you. I'm asking you to have a life separate from my world, Ji-hoon corrected, where proximity is a choice, not a cage, where you're safe because no one sees you as connected to me. Except we would be connected. Yes, Ji-hoon agreed. But invisibly. The rule still exists for everyone watching. They think you're gone, that I chose power, that proximity failed. Meanwhile, we figure out if this can work without the weight of my entire organization analyzing it. Sarah stood up, walked to the windows, looked out at Seoul glittering below. This is insane, she said. Yes, Ji-hoon agreed. It could get us both killed if they find out. Yes. We'd have to be incredibly careful, never be seen together, live completely separate public lives. Yes. Sarah turned to look at him. Why? Why go through all this instead of just letting me leave? It would be easier, safer, less complicated. Ji-hoon stood, crossed the room, stopped just close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Because when you got on that plane, he said quietly, I realized something. The rule was supposed to protect me from grief, from losing someone the way I lost Min-seo. But sending you away felt exactly like losing her. The pain I'd spent 8 years trying to avoid, I felt it anyway, which means the rule doesn't work. Or it means you shouldn't have broken it for me. Or it means proximity isn't the problem, Ji-hoon said. Caring is. And I can either spend my life not caring about anyone to avoid pain, or I can risk caring and deal with the consequences. What if the consequences are catastrophic? Then at least I'll have lived first, Ji-hoon said. 8 years of safety taught me how to survive. 3 weeks with you taught me why survival matters. Sarah felt tears on her face. You're asking me to build a life in the margins, to always be hidden, secret, never acknowledged. I'm asking you to be free, Ji-hoon corrected, free from my world's expectations, free from the role of the woman who got close to the boss, free to choose me every day because you want to, not because you're trapped. And what about you? Are you free? No, Ji-hoon admitted. I'll never be free. Not really. But with you, I'm less imprisoned. And that's worth the risk. They stood there, the Seoul skyline behind them, the weight of an impossible decision between them. I need time, Sarah said, to think, to process. Take all the time you need, Ji-hoon said. I've waited 8 years. I can wait longer. He walked to the door, paused. Sarah? Yes? Thank you for getting off the plane. I haven't decided to stay yet. I know, Ji-hoon said, but you got off the plane, that's enough. For now. He left, and Sarah stood alone in a penthouse suite overlooking a city she barely knew, holding a contract that gave her freedom and a choice that terrified her. Stay and build a secret life with a man whose world ate people alive, or leave and always wonder what they might have built in the margins. She had time to decide. But even as she thought it, Sarah knew the truth. She'd already decided the moment she got off that plane. Now she just had to be brave enough to admit it. Sarah stayed in Seoul. The consulting firm became real. She took on clients, built a practice, lived a completely separate life from Ji-hoon's world. And twice a week, she'd receive a text with a time and location. A cafe no one from his organization frequented. A quiet restaurant across town. Once, a bookstore where they pretended to browse while talking in hushed voices. They were careful. Paranoid, even. Never arrived together. Never left together. Paid separately. No shared social media, no digital trail. To the outside world, Dr. Sarah Chen was a successful independent physician building a practice in Seoul, and Kang Ji-hoon was the Mafia boss who'd recommitted to isolation after briefly breaking his 8-year rule. No one knew they met in stolen hours. No one knew Ji-hoon had a burner phone just for her. No one knew Sarah kept a change of clothes in a locker at the train station so she could vary her appearance. It was exhausting, exhilarating, terrifying, and somehow it worked. For 6 months, they built something in the shadows. Conversations that lasted hours. Comfortable silences, inside jokes, the intimacy that comes from choosing someone every day despite impossible circumstances. Sarah learned about Ji-hoon's childhood, the violence he'd witnessed, the choices he'd made, the person he wanted to be versus the person he had to be. Ji-hoon learned about Sarah's family, her dreams, her fears, the loneliness that had driven her to Korea in the first place. They learned each other, and somehow proximity didn't destroy them, but it changed them. Ji-hoon started making different decisions. Not softer, but more thoughtful, like caring about someone had reminded him why his choices mattered. Sarah started taking risks, not stupid ones, but calculated gambles, like loving someone dangerous had taught her the difference between fear and caution. Then came the night that tested everything. Sarah was in her apartment, a modest place in Itaewon, nowhere near the estate, when someone knocked on her door. She checked the peephole, didn't recognize the man. "Who is it?" she called in Korean. "Delivery," came the response. Sarah hadn't ordered anything. She texted Ji-hoon immediately. "Someone's at my door, says delivery. I didn't order anything." His response came in seconds. "Don't open. Leave now. Back exit. Go to location 7. Location 7 was one of their predetermined safe spots. A hotel in Gangnam they'd established as emergency meeting point. Sarah grabbed her go-bag, always packed, always ready, and went for the back stairs. She made it 3 steps before the door to her apartment exploded inward. 2 men, armed, professional. Sarah ran. The building fire alarm went off. Ji-hoon's doing, she realized, creating chaos. She hit the back exit and ran into Choi. "This way," he said. No explanation, just urgency. They got to a car, drove through Seoul traffic with precision that suggested planning. "What's happening?" Sarah demanded. "Someone found out," Choi said. "About you and Sajangnim. Put surveillance on you. Track the pattern. Tonight they were going to take you. Send proof to Sajangnim. Start a war." Sarah's blood ran cold. "How did you know?" "Sajangnim has counter-surveillance on his counter-surveillance," Choi said. "Found out 3 days ago. Has been working on a response." "What response?" They pulled up to a building Sarah didn't recognize. Choi led her inside. Down. Underground parking, where Ji-hoon waited with a small army. He saw Sarah and something in his expression cracked. "Are you hurt?" "No. Shaken but fine." Ji-hoon pulled her close, then immediately stepped back, remembering they weren't alone. "The men who came for you work for the Park family," he said. "They've been watching me for months, looking for weakness. Found you." "How?" "Facial recognition, traffic cameras, patterns. They're good at what they do, but they made one mistake." "What mistake?" "They underestimated how prepared I was for this exact scenario," Ji-hoon said. He pulled out his phone, showed Sarah a video feed, her apartment, the two men who'd broken in, now surrounded by Ji-hoon's security. "They think they found my weakness," Ji-hoon said. "They have no idea they walked into a trap." Sarah understood. "You used me as bait." "I used their predictability as a weapon," Ji-hoon corrected. "The moment I knew they were watching you, I knew they'd try to take you. I just had to control when and where." "And if they'd succeeded?" "They wouldn't have," Ji-hoon said with absolute certainty. "I've had 3 teams on you for the past 72 hours. You were never alone, never unprotected, even when you didn't see them." Sarah didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. "So what now?" she asked. "Now the Park family learns what happens when they threaten what's mine," Ji-hoon said. "And you learn what proximity to me really means." Over the next 3 hours, Sarah watched Ji-hoon dismantle an enemy operation with surgical precision. The men who'd broken into her apartment were interrogated, gave up their command structure. Ji-hoon's people moved against Park family operations across Seoul, systematically, ruthlessly. By sunrise, the Park family's second-in-command was calling to negotiate. Ji-hoon's terms were simple. Acknowledge the attack was unauthorized. Deliver the person who ordered it. Guarantee it never happens again. Or watch their organization burn. They agreed to all 3. Sarah sat in that underground facility watching the man she loved operate in his world, and finally understood what the rule had been protecting her from, not just danger, but this. Seeing what Ji-hoon was capable of when something he cared about was threatened. The ruthlessness, the violence, the cold calculation of someone who'd learned to survive by being scarier than his enemies. When it was over, Ji-hoon found her in a side room. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "I knew theoretically what your world looked like, but seeing it changes things," Ji-hoon finished. "Yes." He sat beside her. "I told you proximity was dangerous. You're seeing why." "You also protected me," Sarah said. "You saw the threat coming and neutralized it." "This time," Ji-hoon said. "But there will be others. There are always others. And every time, you'll be in danger because they know hurting you hurts me." "So what do we do?" Ji-hoon was quiet for a long moment. "We choose. You choose. If this is too much, if seeing what I become when you're threatened is too much, I understand. You can leave. Go back to Los Angeles. I'll make sure you're safe, that no one ever connects you to me again." "And if I stay?" "Then we stop hiding," Ji-hoon said. "We make it public, official, so everyone knows attacking you is attacking me. It's safer than secret, harder to exploit. But it violates the rule completely." "The rule was already violated," Ji-hoon said. "We've just been pretending otherwise. Tonight proved that pretending doesn't work." Sarah looked at him, at the blood on his hands from the world he lived in, at the exhaustion in his eyes from protecting her, at the love he wasn't saying, but she could see anyway. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Sarah, I'm not leaving," she repeated. "But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "That you won't lose yourself in violence trying to protect me. That the man I'm choosing is the one who held me in his bedroom talking about his nightmares, not the one who just destroyed an enemy organization before breakfast." "They're the same person," Ji-hoon said. "I know," Sarah replied. "But one of them needs to stay visible, even when the other one is necessary. Promise me you won't forget the difference." Ji-hoon took her hand. "I promise." "Then I choose this," Sarah said. "All of it. The danger, the secrecy, the violence, the moments of peace. I choose proximity, even knowing what it costs." "You're insane," Ji-hoon said. "Probably," Sarah agreed, "but I'd rather be insane with you than safe without you." Ji-hoon kissed her then, for the first time. after 6 months of stolen hours and careful distance, and it felt like finally admitting what they'd both known since the night she'd touched him in his study, that some rules were meant to be broken, that proximity could be dangerous and worth it, that love in impossible circumstances was still love. 3 months later, Sarah moved back into the estate, not into the medical wing, into the private wing, officially, publicly. The heads of Ji-hoon's organization objected. He overruled them. His enemies tried to use it as weakness. He turned it into strength, making it clear that attacking her meant war with someone who'd proven he could dismantle organizations overnight. The rule still existed, for everyone else, but not for her. Sarah built a life in the margins of Ji-hoon's world, not part of it, but adjacent to it. She maintained her medical practice, saw patients, lived as independently as possible within the constraints of loving someone whose world required constant vigilance. It wasn't easy. Some days the danger felt overwhelming, the security oppressive, the violence adjacent to their life impossible to ignore. Other days it felt like the most honest relationship she'd ever had, built on choice renewed daily, on proximity chosen despite cost. Ji-hoon didn't change. He was still the Mafia boss, still ruthless when necessary, still living in a world where fear and respect were currencies of survival. But he was also softer with her, more human, like proximity to someone who saw him as a person instead of a position reminded him who he actually was underneath the armor. One night, a year after she'd first touched him in his study, they stood in the private garden watching stars appear over Seoul. "Do you regret it?" Ji-hoon asked. "Breaking the rule?" "Do you?" Sarah countered. "Every day," Ji-hoon admitted. "I regret that loving you makes you a target. That proximity to me costs you safety. That you live with security and threats because I can't protect you perfectly." But I don't regret loving you," Ji-hoon said. "Even knowing the cost, even knowing it might end badly, I'd rather have proximity and fear than distance and emptiness." "You're getting sentimental in your old age," Sarah teased. "I'm 36. Like I said, old age." He pulled her closer. "You're impossible. You love me anyway." "I do," Ji-hoon agreed. "God help me, I do." They stood there, two people who'd chosen danger over safety, proximity over isolation, love over the rules designed to prevent it. And Sarah thought about the question that had haunted her since that first night. If being close to someone puts a target on your back, was distance ever cruelty? Or was it love? She still didn't know the answer. Maybe both were true. Maybe distance had been Ji-hoon's way of loving people without destroying them. And maybe proximity was her way of showing him that some people were worth the risk of destruction. Either way, they'd made their choice. And every morning when Sarah woke in the private wing, with Ji-hoon's security outside her door and his presence across the hall, she chose it again. Because some rules existed to protect you, and some rules existed to imprison you. And the hardest part of living was figuring out which was which before it was too late. If you made it this far, thank you, seriously. That tells me these stories matter to you. Here's what I want to know. If someone told you that loving them would make you a target, that proximity meant danger, would you choose closeness anyway? Or is safety more important than connection? Comment proximity if you'd choose love despite the danger. Comment distance if you'd choose safety over connection. Where are you watching from? Have you ever loved someone whose world made loving them dangerous? What did you choose? If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. It's how this channel survives, and it means more than you think. Next week, we have a story that will absolutely devastate you. A woman woke from a coma to discover her sister had married her fiancé. But she could hear everything, and what she heard changed her completely. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it. Until then, remember, some rules protect us, Some rules imprison us, and sometimes the only way to know the difference is to break them and deal with the consequences. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about these strangers and their impossible choices. See you in the next one.